paradigm initiative. The first session is role of private sector protecting digital and data rights. And I'll be joined by 3 panelists. First, I would like to invite Ridwan Oloyede from Tech Hive Advisory. And also Moyo Oluwasegun from Global Rights. And also we do have Dr. Ololade Shilon from Meta, who will be joining us virtually. And she's here with us already. You are welcome, Doctor. And lastly, we're supposed to be joined by Mrs. Adejumoke from Association of Licensed Telecommunication Companies of Nigeria, Alton, but sent over a message that should be a bit late because of traffic, Lagos traffic. So without wasting much time, we will dive directly into this. Please just. Okay. Oh. So all right, so thank you everyone for investing your time this early morning to be with us. Today we have an amazing panel on private sector obligation on digital and data rights, where we will be talking about the companies and business responsibilities, safeguard their users' personal data, protect their privacy, as well as these companies' actions towards human rights. So especially in relation to United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights. We will also try to look at the emerging trends that we need to keep our eyes on and be thinking about trends related to data rights or data abuse, and also holding the companies accountable in terms of their responsibilities towards human rights. So, and also to mention that this session is looking to fulfill 3 objectives, which are: first, increase discourse around the role of the private sector in advancing digital and data rights. Second, to increase call for accountability on privacy, digital and data rights for the private sector. And the last one is to increase awareness on the United Nations guiding principles and the standards on business and human rights. But before we dive into the panel discussion, I would like to quickly run through the session format. 75 minutes were earmarked for this session. The first 5 minutes, we will use it for introduction, and then 45 minutes for the panel discussion, and the last 25 minutes for Q&A, where we open up the floor for you, the participants, to ask questions related to the topic of discussion. That sounds good, right? Great. But I don't know, please take support. Can you confirm if Dr. Ololade is with us? And she can, let her say hi so that we can.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hello, doctor.
Okay, I take it you can hear me. Hello? Hi. Hello?
Are we set?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Switch.
We can start the, like I said, later on, we'll be joined by, yeah, so I will start with you, Ridwan. As a researcher, I've worked extensively. Okay. All right. I will start with you, Ridwan. As a researcher, I've worked intensively on issue of data privacy protection in Nigeria. So what have you found? What have you found in terms of compliance? Nigerian data protection?
Yeah, thanks, Sonny. Again, my name is Rodon Obede. I lead the policy team at the ministry. I'm also listed as an expert at the Data Protection Unit of the Council of Europe. And yeah, that's a quick introduction about what I do currently. Okay, so to answer the question, so the first thing is we need to first look at what is the motivation itself for why a business should comply with data protection rules if they exist in the first place, or why are businesses increasingly these days paying attention? Why are businesses these days increasingly paying attention to data protection concerns? Why has it become so much of a big buzzword, and it's stirring up conversation in different parts of the world? So I mean, there are a few issues you can point to, and I'm going to make it really Nigerian centric. So if you look at what we had in the last 2 decades thereabouts, We've seen a whole lot of, technological advancement, technological adoption. We've seen also proliferation of internet-enabled devices. If you look at the number of people who had smartphone in early 2000s, or let me say 2010, if you look at that now to this particular period, you see a geometric increase in the number of smartphone users, but more importantly also the use of internet-enabled devices. And what I also mean is that you also look at the number of digital services that were. In 2010, the way we talk about fintech, the way we talk about digital health startups these days, we don't have that kind of conversation. We're not having that kind of conversation. At best, what you had was your bank, where you could probably use your ATM. I mean, even the mobile bank app wasn't so popular then. So now look at this now. So which means we have startup solutions, digital service providers springing up in different parts of the country, providing different services, leveraging personal data of people. And of course, we can always talk about the convenience this product means, whether you want to access cash quickly, whether you need to send money quickly, whether you need to transfer money outside of the country, whether you need to reach out to people, whether you need to communicate, whether you need to learn, whether it's a massive online open platform to take educational courses, whatever it is, the benefit the services is provided itself. So in our own research, whether doing technical analysis, sector by sector review of organizations, or whether it's doing a regulatory impact assessment to look at how, companies, government institutions have been able to, comply with rules and, some sort of obligations that they have on them, is that there's a stark contrast. So first, and I'll try and break it into three. First, you have companies, let's say maybe even more than three classes. Let me just say 4 or 5 categorization. So first, you have the global companies. When I say global companies, I'm talking about companies who have more representation, or their digital services or whatever service they provide cuts across more than just a country. So you have them who they've been influenced by laws in countries where they come from, standards or certification mechanism where they come from, that gives them incentive to actually build these controls into the tools that they provide, which means by extension, they extend this goodwill. And I will call it goodwill, because for a long time, there wasn't any law. Currently, well, appears to be like a law itself, but there's a whole lot of issues around what's the strength of the law, what's the independence of the agency enforcing the law, how have they even, since the law itself came into being, what's the sources that the law itself has recorded? Has it birthed that cultural shift, that corporate shift, that corporate change to make people, be more digitally responsible? And you have to answer, I mean, those are questions you may want to answer yourself. So you have a company like that who their motivation to, extend this goodwill is the laws, the laws in countries where they come from, or in some countries where they operate. Then you have the ones who are maybe local owned businesses, who because they do business with external business, they are compelled, or maybe because as part of a funding round or a grant they are getting, it's a condition that they should build controls into place. And there you have fully Nigerian-based businesses, jump on buzzword, but on jump trends. You see a whole lot of things happening around facial recognition these days, AI, machine learning, different models being developed and tools, but then ignoring safeguards. So you have a genre of storm of them like that whose focus around compliance is merely box ticking. Oh, there's a requirement to file another. Oh, let's file the report and that's it. Not genuine commitment to that cultural shift, to actually embed it into the product, embed it into the organization, make it part of how people do their job within the organization. So on the other spectrum, you then have government institutions who are government institutions. So basically, mainly that. And so the recurring trend we've seen is some try, some don't try, some don't care. Some try to, but still below par, because at the end of the day, when we humanize the conversation and we call personal data, we say human beings. You realize there are people who are either beneficiary of whatever it is that is being done, or there are people who, as a result of ignoring safeguards, not building these controls into place, becomes targets, become victims, are excluded, suffer harm, suffer damages, are discriminated against, are excluded from social services or benefits. So for me, that's just like an environmental scan of what we've seen so far, what the trend has been so far. And of course, we're having this conversation because we need to have that difficult conversation where we need to go from where we are right now to a different place.
All right. Thank you very much, Ridwan. Thanks for laying the foundation for that we can build on for this discussion. And I found it very interesting when you raised the issue of multinational companies that had to cope with multiple regulations and things like that. That's a loophole that we can look into. And so let me come to Moyu. Your organization, Global Rights, has been at the forefront, and if I'm right, lead the process of drafting the National Action Plan on Human Rights. So business and human rights, sorry. Yeah, so I would like to know, I and the participants would like to know what are the provisions in this draft, and how do you think when adopted, it's going to change the narrative in terms of compliance by the companies and respecting human rights in Nigeria.
Sorry, technical challenges. All right. Thanks a lot, Sani. So my name is Moyo, and I work with Global Rights. And the work we do essentially is around human rights, natural resource governance, policy, but human rights remains the centerpiece of the work that we do. And in drafting the National Action Plan for Business and Human Rights, one of the things that informed this draft was essentially to make it a derivative of the UNGP, that's the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. So there's not a lot of deviation from what you have in the UNGP. It's just more contextualizing within the within the Nigerian situation, essentially. And so there are three main prongs of the UNGP, which are also the three main prongs of the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. And the first is, in fact, there's an acronym for it really. There's protect, there's respect, and there's remedy. So protect there stands for the government's responsibility, and that's an existing responsibility really when you think about it, to protect the human rights of citizens. So that's protect the citizens from abuse and to ensure that citizens at all times have their rights respected. So the idea here is to then trickle this protection for human rights down to businesses and to ensure that within the corporate environment, these human rights are respected. Now you have respect, which is then on the part of the businesses, their own commitment to respecting human rights. And that is essentially to say that they have to do the work, to put policies in place, to put structures in place, and to put mechanisms in place that ensure that there are no human rights abuses happening under their watch, and that if there is such happening, there are mechanisms to ensure that the affected parties will be able to seek redress. But beyond that, that when such human rights abuses happen within the organization or under the watch of the organization, there are steps that the organization can then take to review its processes to say that, all right, this has happened. How do we ensure that going forward, such an abuse does not happen in the future? And then there's a third part, which is the remedy. And that's essentially the idea of access to remedy, that's justice. So what mechanisms are available for people who feel like their rights have been violated in the business environment? And then you talk about, I think there are three sub prongs under that. There is the state-based access to, justice mechanisms. There are non-state-based access to justice mechanisms. Apologies, access to is a word that we use a lot in the work that we do, in the work that I do. And there's a third one which doesn't readily come to mind. But essentially, the idea here is that you want to ensure that through this through this document, that's the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, the state itself, which is the Nigerian government, is held responsible and understands that there is a responsibility on their part to protect their citizens in the business environment, that whatever businesses are established within Nigeria also understand that they have a responsibility to their employees, to their workers, to respect their human rights, and that in the event of the abuse of these human rights, it is easy for the victims to seek redress. Now, one of the things that is important to note is that with the National Action Plan, which is the Nigerian Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, in the context of Nigeria, in research, in the research work done essentially to come up with this document, some EU countries were studied, and what you have over in the EU is that they're multinational corporations, and so the direction of their national action plans essentially are towards multinational corporations operating in other countries, which is to say that the action plans are designed to ensure that when these multinationals operate in other countries, their business practices are in line with best practices for human rights, so that they don't do anything that brings embarrassment to the country, because there are oftentimes government vested interest in some of these companies, in some of these multinationals. What we have in Nigeria, however, is a different situation where we don't have that many multinationals. So the design of the NAP, the NAPBHR, which is the short form for National Action Plan for Business and Human Rights, essentially is done in such a way that it focuses on corporations that are, well, we have a couple of multinationals, so that as well as other multinationals operating within the Nigerian environment. And these three guiding principles that I've mentioned are some of the things that the National Action Plan takes into consideration. Now, how do you then tie this into to technology, to data rights and protection? I think that's where the real work comes in, because what we have right now is a broad-based document that if it receives the federal approval, it should be able to cater to businesses at all levels, regardless of whether it's in the tech sector or it's in any other industry. However, what needs to happen is that there needs to be specific work done to address human rights within the context of digital rights. And that's an emerging conversation now, the conversation about whether digital rights actually are human rights. So that work needs to be done. There needs to be the establishment of communities of practice and bodies of knowledge to look into data privacy and protection laws within Nigeria, because one of the things that we're lacking in at the moment is those regulations that ensure that people's rights online are protected. And I think Nigeria is one of the countries that perhaps there's not a lot of regulation around that, and whatever regulation there is at the moment is wrongly focused. So I think I'm deviating, because I wanted to go into talking about how the focus at the moment has been sort of draconian laws that look to limit the rights of citizens. And I mean, an example that readily comes to mind is the Twitter ban. However, that's an entirely different conversation. But just to say that we need to refocus our priorities as a country towards looking into how do we ensure that there are proper data protection laws in place, and that the data rights and privacy of our citizens are guaranteed, to ensure that human rights abuses are not taking place in the digital space. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. You did justice to the question, and I'm glad you made mention. You have made mention of United Nations guiding principles, and I wanted to add that this is a publicly available document that everyone has to. You can search on the internet and read them, and especially the UNGP, which serves at the yardstick for other documents and regulation, clearly states that states what the responsibilities of the state is, what the responsibilities of this company are. So I encourage everyone to do that. And like you said, you were trying to deviate from the conversation, but I'm coming back to that. I will give you a chance. So I think we are nicely passing into the other panelist, which is Dr. Ololade from Meta, formerly known as Facebook. You know, we are encouraged to be reminding people that Meta is Facebook. Yeah, so Doctor, if you can hear me, I would like to ask a question specifically looking at the fact that Ridwan made mention of the multinational companies, and Facebook or Meta is one of the largest players we have in the tech sector. And when it comes to social media, they have they own some of the largest social media platforms. So I would like to ask, what are the policies or I will use the word policy and framework around collection, usage, sharing and processing of data. What is Meta's policy around that? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sani. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I don't know if I'm supposed to introduce myself again. I'll just do that quickly. My name is Ololade Shilon. And of course, I work for Meta and I head privacy policy for Africa, Middle East, and Turkey. So the question you asked is a very interesting one. And we're having this conversation, you know, on a panel that is speaking strictly, well, about human rights. But I don't know if this is going to be a disappointment, but my response or my answer is not necessarily going to be grounded entirely in human rights or only in human rights, because our approach, you know, to collecting, using, processing, and sharing data is really like more of a data protection kind of angle, which delves beyond human rights into things around consumer protection as well. And so, of course, what we have, like other entities, is our privacy policy. We call it a data policy, but it's essentially a privacy policy. So, our privacy policy is what, you know, shares with users how we collect, use, process, and share their data. Hand in hand with this, I want to just flag that we have, and I'll talk about this, I think, a little later on in more detail. We have 7 key principles that you know, we use to sort of share our overall approach to privacy or data protection at Meta. And one of those key principles is that we help people understand how their data is used. And that essentially means that we have a privacy policy that shares detailed information about this. So if you Google it, like you don't have to necessarily even be on any of our social media platforms. You can just, you know, Google it and you find the Meta data policy. And it has like separate components that talk about, you know, what I've just mentioned. So we have a section that talks about what kind of information we collect. And we explain, and I'll try and outline a few of them. We explain that it's things that people do and provide on our platform. Things like, you know, information from our partners, device information as well. We also explain how the information is used, you know, to provide, personalize, and improve our products, to provide measurement and analytics, to promote safety, integrity, and security. So this, of course, will intersect with like core human rights issues. For example, verifying accounts to prevent, you know, unlawful access and hacking, to combat harmful conduct. It could be, you know, things to do with child protection or, you know, other harmful things you can imagine, to detect and prevent spam, and other bad experiences, and to maintain integrity of our product and promote safety and security on and off Facebook. Of course, we also use, the information people share to communicate with the users that are sharing them. So for marketing, to communicate about products, and also to be able to respond when they contact us about any issue that they have. And also research and innovation for social good. We use the information, for, conducting research and supporting different kinds of, issues from health and well-being that, you would have seen in terms of COVID, but also things like, general social welfare and all of that. In terms of how the information is shared, we share such information, basically, what the user does. Like the user will share, information as they communicate with people on social media, and also when a user shares information about themselves, of course, others can also share that information, basically playing it forward about your activities or your comments or whatever you do on social media. Of course, also when you use apps and websites and you log into them, using social media platforms like ours, that your information is going to be shared. And also with, partners who use our analytics services, but of course, it's not like sharing specific personal information, it's aggregated. So people have insights about how people are using their products or interacting with their businesses. I think one part that might be very related to this conversation is about how we respond to law enforcement requests for data. So in respect of this, we, of course, typically receive requests from governments. And the requirement for us is that it must be accompanied by a legal process. So it can't just be like a verbal communication or not grounded in law. So for example, it could be a search warrant or a subpoena to say, we want access to this kind of information. And for us, we only disclose, information in accordance with the terms of service and the applicable law. So we must have good faith belief that the response that is being sought is required by the law in that jurisdiction. They actually affects users in that jurisdiction, and it's consistent with international recognized standards. So which is broad, but that obviously involves or includes also human rights, internationally recognized human rights standards. Two other things I wanted to flag that you'll find in the privacy policy is how companies, meta companies work together, like how information is shared across the companies, all that is there in the privacy policy. How you can also manage and delete your information, which is related to data subject rights. How can you access your information, rectify it if it's, inaccurate, port your information, also delete your information. All that is available in our privacy policy. So I hope that has given like a brief overview of, how we approach transparency around our policies on how we use, collect, and share personal data. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much, Doctor. Yes, I think you answered the question, and it's interesting to know that what the policies are regarding protection of data, and also how that affects human rights. So, and I think you raised an important point of using this data for research, and I think this begs the question of how this data are being protected across. Maybe we would like you to go deep into that, but then I will come back. I will allow you to rest for now. Let me go for read one, and I'll come back for this. Yeah. So read one. Let's look at emerging trends that are coming up. Particularly, I'm interested in two of these emerging trends, which I found. One of them is, and I believe they are highly connected to data protection and highly connected to human rights. So I will throw a question for you and Moyo, but we'll go with you first. If you look at these emerging trends, for example, look at the issue of loan sharks, normally known as loan sharks, that use the platform to collect people's data without, we don't even know their business. And secondly, they use this opportunity to do some inhuman, for example, I'm sure at least one person received a message whereby a loan company sent a defamatory message about someone saying that someone is a chronic defaulter, he ran away with our money, things like that. And they will, if you're lucky, they might even say he's the sponsor of Boko Haram or something like that. Yeah, but it's quite possible. So, and also the second trend I want us to look, I'm trying that I will time to respond to that. And the second trend I'm looking at is the emergence of this digital identity companies that sell highly sensitive data to the highest bidder, be it government, be it private company. So the first question is, if you look at this trend, first I would like to know what loopholes are there that these companies are using to are exploiting to do this, to go about this with an unholy approach and trample on his human rights. That's one. And second, for you, Moyo, I would like to know, what do you think about this coming from the angle of human rights? But I'll go with you first, Ridwan.
Yeah, I mean, first, it's recognizing the fact that, in the grand scheme of things, when conversations like this, we have working on conversations like this, usual reaction is to, and I'm really careful now, but the usual reaction is to, point direction at the bigger companies to say, oh, the bigger companies are responsible for the biggest violation. But in my experience doing research, I'll tell you for free, there are things smaller companies do that the big companies can't dare do at all. They can't dare venture into those spaces at all. They can't dare do it. And so I'm going to give some example. So in 2019, yeah, I think it was 2019, the New York Times broke out a story about a small company in the US called Clearview AI. This company is a facial networking company. That's what they call themselves. But basically, it's just a facial recognition company. And what they do is they scrap data available online, publicly, the one you posted on different social media platforms and use. And as of 2019, this company had about 3 billion faces on its database. So let me give you context. The FBI, which is like probably one of the biggest law enforcement agencies in the world, has just about 500 million faces on its database. So for a private company to have about 3 billion faces, then that's a big problem. In 2021, when they were trying to raise money for some investment round, this company now currently boasts that they have about 10 billion faces on their database, which is the certainty that if any one of you here use maybe a social media platform, they've likely scrapped your picture before and it's currently on their database. So this is a company, for example, who you can't hold accountable under the law we have here, even if there is a strength to it, and which operates freely. Again, I say this, the big companies that people tend to, and I'm not making a case for them, but I'm just giving a case that we shouldn't get distracted trying to chase some rabbit holes where there are actually bigger problems that day in, day out confronts us, but then they are not like the cynosure of everyone's eye. And they escape, the scrutiny that we tend to ascribe to the big companies. So this company has, and what they do basically is, these faces, they sell it to law enforcement agencies.
which means I randomly pick up your face from maybe CCTV footage. I run a scan, then it gives me, a whole lot of information about where you've been, the things you do, people you're associated with, and stuff like that. In the scheme of things, if you want to understand how dangerous this can be, you only need to know, what purpose is the law enforcement using it for? Is every law enforcement, are they actually fair? If you talk about some societies where racial profiling is a thing, religious profiling is a thing, it doesn't mean the same thing. And I'll give you context. This maybe it begins to make sense to us. So after the fall of the Afghanistan, government, the digital ID database of Afghanistan fell into the hand of Taliban, which means Taliban they have a digital identity base, which profile where people live, what they do, who they're associated with, who their family members are. So if you need to do anything, maybe disappear, you can know them, you know where they live, you know who they're associated with. If you need to arrest people in lieu of them, maybe because they ran away, to force them to come back, you can easily do that. So I'm giving this background for us to get an idea of the size of what we are confronting. But that's a big part of the problem. To narrate the digital ID conversation, a lot of digital ID companies there, a lot of them are actually springing up these days, doing interesting fund rounds. And I don't think we're having enough question. We're asking enough question or even paying decent attention to what's going on in that space. It's easy for them to tell you, we've implemented these standards, we've done this, we've done that. But the first is, you build an API, people use it for authentication, basically confirm who you say you are who you say you are. And all other purposes. But if you scrutinize these companies well, so last year I co-authored a book called the Fake AI Book. And part of what we looked at was some of the promises these companies made, especially when they say they leverage AI for identity management. So you see a company that says, a Nigerian company who boasts that, not just one actually, say they boast of facial recognition technology, and they already sell these technologies to some Nigerian-owned businesses too. So what you have is a whole lot of question when it comes to the use of AI. Bias, a lot of harms that comes with it. We're not even sure what data they built these faces on. If you're extremely too dark, for example, maybe it's actually not even going to recognize your face. We don't know yet. No algorithm scrutiny, no algorithm assessment, not so much information even about the data protection impact assessment, or even a summary of it to understand, if all these safeguards were built into the product itself. Nothing. Everybody integrates and we'll just move on. So I'm just giving case studies, or I'm giving examples. So if you now spin that conversation, or we take a deep dive into digital lending, that's like a mess completely. They are responsible lenders, I have to say that. So because last year we put out a report where we looked at about 23 of them. Looked at them across 3 metrics: data protection, cybersecurity, and consumer protection. And while, if you look at everyone in this room, a decent number of us, our biggest pain points will be receiving message from these companies, whether telling you someone is dead or RIP. I really had one of them actually put out an RIP because of someone who is actually owing. It's really crazy. Or whether they send you a message that the person has stolen, and the person is on the run, and the person has HIV, to shame them, or that the person is a ritualist. I just heard that one last night. Muya was the one reading me. Say the person is a ritualist. Or because, of course, the social context here where, a government can decide not to do very well. And one day they can just throw in that moral spin. Say, for example, we want to regulate indecent dressing. And there's some section of the population that will be happy, forgetting the fact that these people have probably not done what they are meant to do in the first place. So the point I'm making is that moral thing that is so strong to the kind of society that we are. So when you say someone is a ritualist, you want to sit up very well. Say he's a ritualist, he uses children for rituals, for money rituals. Money rituals, but maybe the money rituals didn't work enough for the person to actually be owing your company. But point I'm making is that thing that you think is actually your biggest pain point is actually like a small pain point in the grand scheme of things. Because some of the things our research found was almost 30% of these companies that we looked at were actually using deceptive designs. And deceptive design is a situation where, you don't want to do something, but you're actually compelled to do it. You're manipulated to do it. So I'll give examples. You're trying to book an hotel, maybe using a flight aggregator, for example, to book, you want to travel, or maybe you're using an hotel and you need to, get the accommodation. They're telling you, 50 people check the same room. This room is hardly available, or something like there are 3 small seats available, there are 3 rooms available. It prompts urgency in you to pay. I don't know if anyone has actually been a victim of that, but nothing like that is happening. So deception. Or is it when you want to purchase something, we want add something to it for you. And there are a whole lot of examples of deceptive design. So for these people, what they did was, there's this thing they call positive comment as a service, where you hire companies and they make positive comment about your product in the Play Store, for example. So when you want to do, a lot of us want to your first, or you want to book an Airbnb, you first look at review. So when you see a nice review, you're tempted to download the app, right? So you see that a lot. So, and where we found the problem is, so, oh, this app is really so amazing. They gave me $10,000 loan. We don't spend dollars as official currency in Nigeria. That's where you begin to see the problem. That the people dropping these comments are actually not here. Or you see them making reference to a currency of another country, or you just see bogus claim. Nobody lends anyone 10,000 USD on a mobile app for collateral. So you find deceptive patterns there. You find use of location data, and there's a whole big marketplace location data. So, and I told this story, and I will tell you again. Everyone who's probably listened to me, I've probably heard this too many times, but it's just how big, location data, how significant it is. So there's the American priest who, was using this mobile app called Grindr network, or a dating app for this time around. So somehow the parish where he, leads, they were able to get, buy location data about this guy, where they find out that, oh, this guy was actually using, they bought specific location data from the app, Grindr itself. And they find that, oh, this person was actually meeting someone in a particular facility, which then led to his sacking. And here, I'll tell you to supplement the moral compass. If you turn that scenario around, it could mean something completely different. For those who are like Muslims, probably have heard about Muslim Pro. It's a popular app that a whole lot of Muslims used. This app itself was also selling data to local authorities. So in a world where you have things like profiling of people based on their faith, this means a lot. And I can go on talking about even apps like period tracking app that females use, all of these things. So location data actually means a lot, depending on what's being used. So you find use of location, a whole lot of collection of location data by these mobile apps, a whole lot of, these apps where your behavior, and this is it, let me give you a context. It's not just what you do on the app. These software development kits actually map also the things you do outside the app. Where do you spend time? What contents do you consume? What websites are you checking? What are the things that you like? So if all of these things, again, I'll tell you, your biggest pain point is that somebody is sending you a message, but also all of these things are actually going on in this space. And there's not enough scrutiny. But the reaction, just one of the symptoms, which is, the sending people messages and stuff like that, or even the excessive interest that it creates to be. All of these things is for us to, don't chase. I would say don't chase, but then don't lose, don't be distracted by the popular conversation to ignore even the smaller ones who are actually next door to us. So those are some of the problems. And those are things that we need to start paying attention to. The small companies, the small fintech company that you're signing up for, that amazing product that you're signing up for. So the thing, people tell you, oh, read this. The truth is, as a researcher, I've seen, so another amazing story I'll tell you from on their privacy notice. It takes you to exactly the same products, like exactly the same 3-paragraph privacy notice. 4 products. It leads exactly to the same place. So if someone is telling you, oh, read privacy notice, it's not helping you. Because what if I put the privacy notice out there that it's not genuinely reflective of what I do? I've seen people adopt templates for privacy notices, and even the template generator, you see it just beneath it there. So what kind of companies are you dealing with? So again, on a user level or on an individual level, these are questions you need to ask yourself. These are conversations we need to have. So, and I think it's important. Maybe I'll get time to, talk about some other things, but I think it's important to just keep quiet at this point. Yeah.
All right.
All right. You can go on more.
So I'll pick up from some of the things that Ridwan has mentioned, and just from the last things said, you realize that these issues are issues of regulatory and governance facts, especially within our context in Nigeria. Because what's going on is it's really indicative of the Nigerian problem, right? Which is that we exist as a country where we masquerade as if things are very okay, but the rule of law in this country essentially is that the bigger predator in the jungle is the person you fear next. And so we don't really have our act together as a country. And that's why we have these loan apps, like they've both mentioned, get away with a lot of the things that they get away with. Recently, the government announced that they will take action to work with, I think, Google to delist some of these apps from their Play Store, and that has happened. But there are still some of those apps that the government is unaware of. And what you find happening is that they've become creative now, especially with people who use Android devices. Because I think iPhones have a level of security that Androids don't provide due to the fact that Androids are more open source. So what you have now is that some of these loan apps will reach out to you via WhatsApp, especially because they've built a repository of contacts and contacts of contacts just from, gaining access to people's information, and send you messages saying you can install our app here, you can borrow this amount of money. Right? What they don't tell you is that at the due date, they would come knocking and you start to get those type of defamatory messages that, quite honestly, like Ridwan rightly mentioned, some of these big companies they dare not try it. And I think that's where we need to start placing focus on, is the companies that are targeting the citizens at the bottom of the pyramid, because it's strategic. I mean, perhaps not many of us in this room would have to borrow 3,000 naira or borrow 5,000 naira from a loan app. I mean, things get that desperate, then you probably reach out to a friend or someone. But then the market seller or the student or somebody who doesn't have access to the kind of resources that people who are anywhere on the spectrum of middle class to upper class, who doesn't have access to these resources, would see such loan apps as their go-to when they're in need. And part of the problem is also that there is not an understanding of what data they are giving away. They don't understand that their data should be protected. They don't even understand what the data in itself is. And so we have a really big problem that requires, it will take a couple of years for us to be able to address this effectively in terms of putting in place the mechanisms and putting in place the structures that are needed to essentially to stem the tide of what's happening in terms of carelessness with the data of citizens. Now, we're starting to see the use of terms that suggest that we are developing our digital selves. So if you do research online, you would see the use of words like the metaverse, right, which is to suggest a virtual space. You'd see words like the netizens, which is to suggest citizens who use the internet, digital citizens essentially. And what that means is, as we are developing our digital selves, as our lives start to take shape beyond the physical and exist in that plane of data and the internet and the digital space, there has to be very, very firm regulations to ensure that the same things that we enjoy in our physical lives as human beings, the same things that you enjoy as your fundamental human rights, can be translated to that space as well. And that's why at the moment there is still a lot of confusion globally about how to how to handle conversations online. So you're having debates about freedom of speech and whatnot. It's because at the moment, technology is evolving so fast, so geometrically, that what the issues we're dealing with today will be multiplied in 2 years, and then they'll be significantly greater in 10 years. So if we don't start putting these mechanisms in place, then we find ourselves dealing with serious problems. Now, as an human rights organization, one of the things that we're working to do as Global Rights is that we have been working we've been working with different sets of stakeholders, so whether government, private sector, civil society organizations, to ensure that we can develop resources that will help to help businesses understand the need to commit to the UNGP and to commit to the NAP-BHR. And some of these resources really I'd like to say they're not getting the traction that they need to get at the moment. And that's because we've also had a hard time breaking into getting the private sector on board. So we've organized about 2 different business and human rights roundtables where we've been able to get businesses on board, but specifically fintechs, because it seems that's the new in thing in Nigeria. It's been difficult to get them on board. And these are the people that we need to get on board, especially because, for instance, we're having this conversation about, data protection and privacy. If we get these people on board, we can start to have the right conversation about how do we, take on the responsibility of ensuring that these human rights are translated digitally as well. Because one thing that we cannot rely on is government regulation in Nigeria. There's no sector that you want to examine in the country where you can say there's effective regulation or oversight. There's none at all. And so the responsibility is then on, and that's why it's a lot of work that has to be done by the civil society and these private organizations to ensure that they take on that responsibility of protecting human rights within the digital space. So there's a lot to be said. It's not a conversation that stops here, but I think maybe as a country, we're underestimating the importance of this conversation, because in a couple of years, it's going to start to really tell on us when we're dealing with significant issues around breaches of privacy and the carelessness essentially with our data. And just to wrap things off, I'm not too versed with the tech language and with that space, but there was recently a news article about how someone, I think in the United States, was able to gain access to the information of Nigerians on the National Identity Management, essentially with about just $5,250. And so the question for me really is, how do you enforce regulations for private companies in terms of ensuring that they protect and they understand the sanctity of this data, when even the government itself does not seem to understand what it's handling and is careless with this very data? It's a huge problem. And I mean, I can't say that I have the solutions, but conversations like these and roundtables where we can have these conversations and really look at what solutions we can come up with are important moving forward.
Yeah, thank you very much, Moyo. I think what we do, the consensus we have right now is we all agree that in terms of regulation and the frameworks that are currently are in place. So let me quickly acknowledge the presence of the panelists I told you about in the first place, Mrs. Adejumoke Ajala, who is representing Association of Licensed Telecommunication Companies in Nigeria. She's the committee chairman, seminars and event. She's also the head of corporate affairs at NatCom Development and Investment Limited. Welcome, Ma. And let me just throw a quick one. So I would like to know what is the state of compliance in the telecommunication sector when it comes to digital rights, when it comes to human rights, and also data. Very running against time, so yeah.
Much. I totally apologize for coming late. I guess I was trying to schedule like meetings at the same time in the morning. Talking about data rights, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm deeply honored to be here. Representing my chairman, Engineer Benga Debayo, and the whole of telco space, Alton. I will say thank you very much for inviting us to this big event. With regards to data protection rights and privacy rights in telco space, we'll realize that NCC generally has a strict rule with regards to privacy. Your information and the information of consumers are protected. You're required to have security protection, firewalls, end-to-end protection, access controls with regards to access or security controls to the consumers' protection. But the major thing we have also, apart from consumer protection rights, which NCC has, which is the Nigerian Communications Commission, is to ensure that before anyone or even if it's a law enforcement organization wants to access the consumer's data, you need to obtain permission from the commission first. You need to the law enforcement agent has to be a certain cadre before we are allowed to release such security or such information for security reasons. Also, another major thing is what NITDA has done. The NDPR actually provides for data controllers, and with the data controllers in all telco spaces, you realize that those data controllers actually ensure that there's a data protection policy in each company. And with that, they're able to train people on data protection so that even those who have access to consumers' information are protected or are ensuring that those information are protected in this secured way. So indeed, people have ideas that, maybe telcos go and send or sell their information to third parties. That information really is incorrect. And even the information you're talking about access, I believe NIMSI that and said that was not possible and that was not true. And because it was a major concern to all telcos at that point in time. So indeed, with regards to telco space, your information is protected, and NCC has ensured and put measures, strict measures in place to ensure that that doesn't happen. Any breach as to that. I do agree that yes, there are some loopholes from here to there because we have very intelligent hackers, not only in Nigeria but also. But then we consistently and continuously that there are security measures in place.
All right, thank you very much. So, Dr. Olola, I will come back to you. Can you hear us? Hello, Doctor. Hello, Doctor. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Want to drama. Yeah.
All right. So in 2 minutes, Dr.
So I can't hear you. You've been muted, so I can't hear you.
muted.
Now I can hear you. So please repeat. I didn't get anything you said.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so I was saying, building on the initial discussion we were having, and also the point you raised regarding the usage of this data, let's say, for research and relevant activity. I would like to know what safeguards you as a company have in protecting this data, maybe during transfers, if there is, and if it involves third party, what are the measures and what safeguards are in?
Thank you. So that is such a broad question that, and I think you said in 2 minutes. It is virtually impossible for me to even scratch the surface in 2 minutes. And so what I'll just try and share with you is our overarching approach. I mentioned earlier about our privacy principles. I can share that a little bit, like in more in depth. So the first one the second one I had shared with you is about the privacy policy. Now we help people understand how their data is used, right? There are a couple of other ones that I can share that sort of sheds light on our approach. So the first one is that we give users control of their privacy. So essentially, we believe everyone should have the ability to make their own choices that are best for them. Because honestly, we found that privacy means different things for different people. So what we do is we empower people with the different controls and sort of help them understand how to adjust those controls and leave it to them to make the decisions around their privacy that makes the most sense to them. And so there's a lot of controls that we have. I could reel them off. We have the privacy checkup tool. We have manage your information, download your information. There's a lot of tools that we have that people can use sort of control the data they share and how their data is used. The other key principle is that we work hard to keep information secure. So we are continuously working to protect users' accounts and also building security into every Facebook product that we build. And so our security systems are running, nonstop to catch and stop threats every second, literally. The other thing that I can mention that is close to or is related to data subject rights is that we of course recognize that every user owns and can delete their own information, right? So that means people can decide what to share with whom, and they can decide to change their mind after they've already shared information. Other principle is that improvement is constant, so we do not rest or sleep. We are always working to develop new controls. And the final one is that we are accountable. So we have a very comprehensive privacy review process. And so we ensure that we put our products to rigorous data security testing. And we also engage extensively with external stakeholders, policymakers, privacy experts to help inform our data practices. In response to your question specifically about research, I wanted to say that we do not, so we do, process data for research purposes in a privacy protective way. So you will not find, data being shared that, contains personal information like, if it's for example, for COVID, the kind of COVID things we were doing, we wouldn't have data that has like the person's name and their email and other things that can identify them. So it's aggregated data that can then be used for research purposes. I don't know if that is 2 minutes and if that satisfies your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much for that. And well, I would like to apologize we have used up time allocated question and answer. We still have 4 minutes. So I will open up the floor for questions before I come back to the panelists for 30 seconds. Yeah, sorry for that. So, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, panelists, for a very incisive discussion. I want to ask, well, sorry, my name is Dan Lami Basharu. I'm Director, Anglo-Nigerian Welfare Association for the Blind, and a member of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Now, I wanted to find out, how do we ensure that the human rights of persons with disabilities are clearly accounted for in the NAPBHR, that's the National Action Plan for Business and Human Rights? Thank you.
That's for you, Mo.
All right. So I hope I can do this within 30 seconds. But yes, actually, both persons living with disabilities and vulnerable groups are two different groups that we're looking to ensure that are protected within the NAPBHR. And that's why the access to remedy bit is very important. And recent developments, especially on social media, have emphasized to us. In fact, we had a meeting at the office a couple of days back around ensuring that, digital privacy and protection rights for children and people living with disabilities. So that's something that will definitely be taken into consideration in the next roundtable for the business and human rights, but more so just to say that it's of particular importance rather within the context of access to remedies, especially because there already exist businesses within Nigeria that do not cater for vulnerable groups and people living with disabilities.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. Okay, so I want to ask a question here to Dr. on the Meta. So it's quite interesting that when we were talking about the policies that you have, when you're talking about the policies that you have on Meta, like on Facebook, talk about the user's control, among other things. But I think that when we're talking about digital rights, it's deeper than the way we are seeing it in terms of if we really, really want to have this conversation about rights of citizens in Nigeria. I'll give you a practical example. I was working on a story, somebody did a tweet on Twitter about something related to what she shared her experience about what she encountered. I had to DM this person for the access to actually use that particular tweet. Now I could have just screenshot the tweet and put in my story. But when I contacted that person, she said, I tweeted it, but I don't want it to be on any news platform because I can change my mind to delete it at any point in time. That is what we're talking about digital right here. Now, also the question of you having a user control. Now, I've read your policy. Your user control is giving me access to control what I'm posting on Facebook so that if I don't want you to see what I'm posting, it restricts you from seeing it. I'm not protecting myself from the next person. I'm protecting myself from you, the owner of Facebook, the owner of Meta. So what is my protection from you? See, because as far as I'm concerned, personally, unless you have to educate me on it, for every social media, there's nothing free, basically. There's nothing free. I'm using Facebook at a cost. I am the product. My information is the product. So I go on Jumia to Google something on Jumia, and the next thing I'm seeing and heard about Jumia on my timeline. You get, what have you done with my data? That's what I'm talking about. I'm not protecting myself from the next person. I'm protecting myself from you. What are you using my data to do? So that's basically what I want to understand. Thank you.
Do I answer? Can you hear me? Hello? Hi? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So just to be clear what your question is how do you protect yourself from Meta itself? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, the question is a bit convoluted, and honestly, I cannot answer that in 30 minutes. So like I mentioned, we have a lot of controls that users can use to protect themselves or protect their personal information. But at the end of the day, people come to Facebook in particular to connect and engage with people across the world. So the assumption is that if you are on Facebook, you are there for that specific purpose. So the controls that we're going to provide to you will be related to what you're there for. The conversation about you go on Jumia and all those kind of things is something that honestly, I don't think we can talk about in 30 minutes. But the reality is that people engage online across, can you still hear me?
When I place the order, the Apple model that I was.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
I never knew that
Okay, so I was saying people come on, go on, engage online across several platforms. And what happens is that oftentimes they engage in a lot of activities that are not always necessarily connected to Facebook. We hear all about cookies all the time. You engage, you go on a website that has to do with, let's say, traveling, and that, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. That has to do with travel. And then there are cookies that have been placed on that website that then, will, for lack of a better word, follow you. And so it's not only on Facebook that you will see things that have to do with, what you're going to check. If you go to, I don't know, any other website, you will see that kind of information. So the issue, I think, is not really about Meta. The issue is about education and for people to understand. Like the question I will ask is, do people read privacy policies? First of all, to understand exactly how whatever information they are sharing is going to be used. We need to educate ourselves and not put the blame all the time on companies that are engaging and providing services online. So in summary, that's what I'm going to say. It's the conversation is too deep to be able to give you a comprehensive answer. Thank you.
I would like to pick someone. It has to be a female so that we can balance, but I can't see any. Can we?
I'm here.
Okay, that's great.
Okay, I have a lot of questions, but I'll ask just one because of time. The speaker to your left spoke about deceptive designs used by aviation companies, airline companies, or even hotels. I just want to find out what exactly is wrong with that as far as digital or data rights is concerned. Or do you not see it as a marketing strategy?
Okay, thanks. So there's a very thin line between responsible marketing and manipulating people to doing things that are in your favor as a brand. So I gave two examples of flight aggregators, hotel aggregators, where you get that notch, but it's not just, those are not just, if you look at whether it's Princeton, whether it's, there's a PDB guideline from, so there's a new guideline by the Data Protection Board, and it's open for comments, and I would really encourage you to take a look at that document itself. It has broader classification and more examples of deceptive patterns. So it's not just about, so it takes away your autonomy in the sense that you're literally, sometimes you're, so I'll give another example. So there's an advert that reads like, only people, something like suggests only people who are correct buy this kind of brand. If you can't afford it, then something like that. So it literally bullies people. So it's more about being able to manipulate people, more about being able to explore people's behavior, people's psychological states, then force them to make decisions that are in favor of the brand. So if you look at whether it's a favorable comment that are not genuinely reflective of people's experience of the brand, that gives some sort of support for being to trust that brand, you're literally manipulating me into buying products when maybe genuine customers who have actually used the product are not even satisfied. Or whether it's a case of I buy something on your website, for example, and while checking out, you already attached emails to it for me that I didn't ask for. So deceptive patterns, a lot of them, but the central theme to it is, you can market responsibly without necessarily manipulating people into making decisions, especially when they are not genuinely reflective of quality or when you're misrepresenting the quality of your product or experience. It's a thin line between responsible marketing and manipulating people into making decisions.
All right, thank you very much. I can see so many hands, but we ran out of time. In fact, we have added 7 minutes already, and I would like to apologize for that. And that 30 seconds that I plan to give out, I'm sorry to the panelists, it's not possible, but I will make a special case. You can lead, Mrs. Adejumuke, so 30 seconds for you. Your last.
Thank you very much. I apologize again. And even just hearing the comments is really interesting. I wanted to say something even in relation to what said one of the people in the group said. Regards to your information and data privacy, I always suggest that when you go into any website or anything like that, or any group, it's best you look at the privacy policy so that you're aware. Most of us don't even do that. We just overlook it and we accept the terms and conditions very easily. We just click just because we want to have access to that site. And then forget to realize that, when you do that, that means you've given them access to your information, you've given them access to your privacy. So really, even in Nigeria, we really do not have such a robust data protection policy or rights or regulations, which is something I know a lot of people are, gaining for. So I normally advise people that even when you do upgrades on your systems, on your phones and things like that, you're actually giving them more access. I know some people who deliberately will not even do upgrades because, they're trying to limit the access they have. So when you do things like that, you go to your phones and, limit permissions, as to what you really want to do. So that's my advice concerning it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I would like to thank our panelists, Mr. Ridwan. Thank you, and Mrs. Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Ajala and Moyo. Thanks for your time, and I would also like to. Oh, sorry, Doctor. Thank you very much for. You were hiding behind screen. That's why
you put me
sorry
behind
for that.
screen.
I really thank you for thank you for giving us your time to have this conversation. And also I would like to thank you, the attendees that are here and also those that joined virtually. So with that, I am saying on to the next one. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Sunny. Before we leave, please, could you mind taking a group picture? Yes. The moderator and the panelists. We have just 30 seconds. Your time starts now.
Doctor should be included.
Yes, she should.
So how do we do? Okay.
Okay, while they do that, we are about to start the next session. The next session will be hosted by TechHa NG, a Nigerian-based organization that focuses on women's rights. And the session is Tech Culture, Power Play, and Gender Inequality in Technological Workspace. And it will explicitly discuss women's position in the ICT sector with an objective to understand women's position in the ICT sector, discuss the intersection of SGBV and tech culture, and also discuss the intersection of power play, gender inequality, and inclusion. And the session will be moderated by Aisha Salahuddin. Aisha is a journalist and multimedia storyteller who has covered thorny issues for multiple international media organizations. And she is currently a TV producer with CNN International, where she writes, directs, produces shows such as Inside Africa, African Voices Changemakers, and Marketplace Africa. She's also the producer of
I Like Girls, a narrative storytelling podcast documenting the experiences of African women. Tech RNG, are you ready? Okay, I think we have to give them 2 minutes. So while we wait for them, you could just stand, stretch your legs, take tea breaks. Okay, she's here. All right, please, let's give it up for Amina Salahuddin. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amina Salahuddin, and I'll be moderating this session on gender-based violence perpetrated via digital spaces. Before I introduce my panelists, I just want to say a little bit about gender-based violence. I work at TECA. I'm the programs officer at TECA. And at TECA, what we do is a social enterprise where we try to include women and girls who are not particularly tech savvy into the stream of technology. You know, we have a lot of tech bros and techs doing the good work, but there are also a chunk of Nigerian women who do not have access to technology. So essentially, giving technology to her at the barest level, at the simplest minimum, that is what we do. And our work is on 3 strands, which are digital literacy, tech for governance, and community. So everything we do is built around these 3 strands. And I mean, if we're talking about women and technology, we should also talk about the kind of violence they can actually face online. So that is why this session is particularly important, because technology facilitated gender-based violence is something that is increasingly becoming rampant these days, given the new digital platforms that are coming, and we know that anytime soon it's not going to stop. So this is something that has to be addressed. So we're going to be talking about that today, and I have 3 brilliant panelists who I'm going to be introducing. One minute, please. My Aisha is a journalist at CNN, a lot of amazing work around women and girls and covering stories in Africa. And she introduced me as Aisha Salahuddin. Actually, she was talking about Aisha Salahuddin, not me. I'm Amina Salahuddin, so just clearing that up. And she also has a podcast called I Like Girls. I Like Girls focuses on issues surrounding African women, unique to African women, and just talk about, just have conversations about women and what it is they are facing in their lives, and how to go about living in a society that is very discriminatory to women. So Aisha, please, thank you very much. Please, a round of applause for Aisha. My second panelist is Nana Wanchukwu. So Nana is a policy manager at Silverchip Fox Consulting. She's a lawyer, she's a researcher, she's a rights advocate, and an affiliate at the Harvard Berkeley Clan Center, Cambridge. Nana sits on the board of TECA NG, that is Tech Women Project Initiative Limited, and Event Nigeria's board. So please, a round of applause for Nana. And my third panelist today is Winga Sesson. Is the executive director of Paradigm Initiative. I don't know if he's here yet, because I heard that, yes, okay, he's here. And I mean, no need for introducing the entire DRIF session and things we're having today is as a result of, the work he and his team have been doing around what we are trying to do today. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. So we're just going to give you this microphone. So we're just going to have, a little conversation, an enlightening one, of course, around gender violence perpetrated via digital spaces. Yeah, so Aisha, I'm going to start with you first. So yeah, you're very vocal on social media, for example, Twitter to be precise, and there are some times that you would tweet or say something online that people would find unconventional or controversial, given the fact that you're a woman and also maybe because you're a Muslim. So there are times when you would put out your opinions there and then you would receive backlash. What is that experience like? What has that been?
I guess you're asking for how it feels to be dragged on social media for having opinions. It doesn't feel great, but I think over the years, I've sort of built a tough skin. Because first of all, it's social media. I know you can't come to my house and beat me. So it's just, social media does something to you because you know that you're far from the person. It just gives you more kind of audacity to say things that if you see the person in real life, you would never be able to say. So with that, I'm not saying that there haven't been cases of violence that have like resulted from social media, but I mean, when you compare the numbers, most people just are comfortable behind the keyboard. So with that knowledge and information, I really just don't care. So, and like I said, over the years, I've built a thick skin. Like if you're dragging me every other day, like at some point, I'm used to it. And I know that you are not my audience for that kind of information, because there's some people that you have to admit that you're far gone. Like I'm not going to try to talk to you or try to convince you that women's rights is important. If at your age and whatever you don't believe it, then there's no going back. So I guess just to summarize everything I've said, it doesn't feel good, but I'm used to it. And passing out information about women's rights is more important than people's reactions, childish reactions. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Aisha. Thank you for that. Hi, Nana.
Hi.
Okay.
I know.
I'm just going to ask, something around, law policy.
Don't put me in a box.
No, I would not do that. But I would just like to know what you think, like how watertight are the policies or laws that we have around protection of women online generally, and especially, are there specific reporting channels that exist when it comes to gender-based violence, particularly against women online?
Okay, so this is how I'm going to speak about the policy issues. There's the platform, right? Internal policies of the platform on which the violence is being perpetrated. And then there's also the laws around the countries that the platforms operate in. And then there are the laws of Nigeria. The major platforms that we find some of these acts of violence, there's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And I try not to limit online violence to just social media platforms. There are other digital platforms. There are games, do you understand? There are different emails, for instance, right? I remember a story that someone told at a forum like this, where someone had written her, she had posted a picture, right? And then someone wrote her on LinkedIn and obtained her email address, then wrote her a long email telling her how ugly she was and how she needed to go and hang herself, you can imagine the amount of effort this person put into doing something like this. while she couldn't report on LinkedIn because the LinkedIn exchange was innocent, it wasn't anything to report about. Now, how do you report the email exchange? Do you understand? The policies around, what I'm trying to paint a picture of is that even for platform policies, there's no clarity on specific issues like being targeted for an attack, being harassed, and all that. It has a reporting mechanism. But then the reporting mechanisms are not specific to gender. They're either you're being harassed or this tweet is harassing. Again, the reporting mechanisms are dependent on the country you're reporting from, right? So despite advocacy and different efforts by different peer groups and support groups and pressure groups to ensure that some of these platforms update their reporting mechanisms, they don't really, or they haven't gotten to that point where they do it. Facebook, on the other hand, has people who have a different type of access to be able to report certain things with context, right? But again, there's lack of awareness on the people who do this. And I'm being told that it's done for their own protection. You don't tell people who Facebook trusted partners are so that they're protected and they don't get harassed as well. But how is it a protected class of people can have a special access to report something that bothers every woman? Do you understand? So the systems don't work great. And there's really no need talking about policies because it's owned by the same company, right? Because it's basically the same thing across board. Then games, right? I don't know how many people play online games here. Some of the games are violent. They portray violence against women. They play out violence against women. I don't even want to talk about the misogyny because the misogyny is something that's almost every game maker has to put into their games to make sure it works or sells for them. But there's actual rape. There's the simulation of rape in different types of games, right? And we're not talking about games on Pornhub, right? Sorry, I hope everyone here is above 18, 21. Sorry, explicit content. So we're not talking about games on Pornhub. We're not talking about games that are highly sexualized, but these are games that are available even for children, right? And you see this portrayal of violence against women. Then again, going further to online violence, because I believe that even sex workers can be violated, right? If you look at I'm not saying that you use porn sites, but if you go on porn sites, right? If you look at pornography games, for instance, there is more. If you look at the data, I have a colleague who works on these issues. If you look at the data, it's highly skewed towards violence against women. People would rather simulate rape. People would rather simulate strangulation. People would rather simulate incest. People would rather simulate underage or what's it called now? They would rather simulate pedophilia, right, than regular what adults will consensually do. So these things that happen online have different aspects of it. And the reason I raise issues around this is because no one wants to talk about the not very morally, upright issues. Policies are not made around them. Do you understand? So they exist in the shadows. So coming down to what's the policy online against women in Nigeria? Winger, correct me if I'm wrong. It doesn't exist. There is none that's specific to women. But then the Cyber Crimes Act and Sexual Offences Act, you have the thing that goes across board. It feels like, oh, let's insert this here. Someone thought about it, maybe they've talked too much about it. Because I remember when the advocacy was going for, let us hide some things they like and not put some of the things they don't like and just give them some. There's no clear policy on when this happens, who do you report to? The police that you need to speak to when someone has shared your nude photos online will first of all ask you, so why did you now take nude photo? Why are you taking naked picture? Do you understand, right? And they don't even understand that a threat to leak your nudes online is a crime on its own, but they did not share it. Did they share it? And you find out that there's no protocol for handling online violence against women when it has happened. Because when it occurs, for instance, we saw the issue of a school, Christian schools, right? Where a child or children, engaged in something that was beyond their age. But what I saw people that you would assume have sense on a normal day do is send me the video. I've not seen it. Oh, this is what, making untoward commentary on such things, refusing to understand that what has just occurred is violence. Do you understand? It wasn't for entertainment. So then there's no protocol. The police people handling it, you see some of them, on Instagram, on Instablog comments or in Instablog comments, talking and saying, oh, when they brought it, I watched it, and what I observed, that's not how it should be. There should be a protocol. I've seen someone who wrote to me, I think I wrote this on a blog, who wrote to me and said that her boyfriend, who she, said she was dumping, decided that he was going to leak her nudes and he was going to post it. I directed her to a police person, and the person directed her to another person, the location where she was. And what the person said to her is, bring the photo he wants to post, let me see. So you see, and when I got on the phone to speak to this person, and he was genuinely defending himself. So I was so confused. I was wondering, is this from a point of, I don't know what to do, or I am a pervert who wants to, use my position to do things that are untoward? So there is no protocol. If you speak, I remember a couple of years ago, I think this was in 2014 or 2015, Open Society Initiative organized some event. I'm still trying to remember, but it was around violence against women. And there was this lady, this police woman, who was in charge of the gender desk, who sat down and argued that if you acted in an immoral manner, do you understand? She had no honors to protect you. That's a policewoman who was rich. She was arguing, she was fighting for her right to disrespect someone who has been violated because of maybe her moral, So Nigeria may not in the next couple of years enact any laws that border on the sidelines of morality, right? But one of the things that's important to note is these laws currently don't exist. Women don't have any special protection online. I feel like the biggest or closest win we can get is to engage with the platform. The platforms have internal policies that can generally work around helping women protect themselves or learning how to protect themselves. Sorry, I don't want to hog the microphone too much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nana. I'm talking about the responsibility that tech companies do have. Winga, what would you like to say about that? What is the role you are supposed to play here? I'm sure Nana has something to say, and Aisha, so we're just going to take it like that.
All right. So good news is that half the world now posts content owned by 2 billionaires. Mark and Elon, right? And that is important. That is important because there are many sides to this conversation. I know we're talking about platforms, but the reason why we're shifting responsibility to platforms is because society or the countries where these incidents happen are failed to protect citizens. I'm not surprised about the policewoman who is saying that. Some of the worst defenders of the patriarchy are women. And I want to say of a certain generation. And I think that we need to be very careful. We need to be very careful. And the reason we need to be very careful is because when we entrust a desire for justice to somebody who does not care about the circumstances or the outcome, we make the process worse. When we do training for judges, for example, one of the things we try to do is to create an opportunity for them to see the issues I had the privilege of training judges just after NSAS. No, on the day of the anniversary, October 20, 2021. And I put up a picture of NSAS and I just looked at the room for a few minutes. And there were people who were not comfortable. By the way, I did the same thing with policemen, policewomen, and DSS, security agencies. And those ones, of course, were clearly like, why is this guy doing this? But thankfully, pain was painful. So if we're paying for the venue, then you have to sit down and listen. But I did that to create an opportunity for us to have a conversation, because the truth is many of these custodians of justice have not even thought beyond their cultural, religious, and in quotes, elderly. Because there's certain things, the woman who was speaking, for example, I'm sure was speaking as an elder who is a custodian of morality, of national morality. Like, oh my God, you have dreadlocks and you are complaining a policeman arrested you and you're a man. Because as far as they are concerned, these children of nowadays, we are sports. That's their stand. And that's where the danger exists. And that's why, unfortunately, we seem to be focusing on platforms. And I will come to platforms in a second. But I think we need to be careful with focusing on platforms. Because now that Elon has bought Twitter, we don't know what he's going to do with Twitter. Twitter may become better. Twitter may become worse. He may still sell it when he realizes that Twitter can't make money or whatever. But what this tells us is that for many years in the human rights community, we've been talking about the fact that there are cloud nations and nation states. And many people know that the nation state has failed them, so are beginning to look to cloud nations for solutions, which they can't find. There's no way. I'll tell you what happened with the Chrislam Schools video. Once that incident happened, I reached out to contacts at Twitter. I couldn't watch the video because I know, for example, if I watch it, I'll be the first they will send to jail with the cybercrime law in Nigeria. Because, when courts suing the government for that same cybercrime law, so if I do something about that cybercrime law, I suspect that they will just quickly say, yeah, throw him into jail. But I couldn't watch it, and I didn't have to be honest. You didn't have to watch the video to know that this was wrong. And then I flagged with Twitter and said, listen, there is this video, I've seen a timeline, and the way my timeline is set is that I don't see video or pictures that are flagged or that are considered mature or considered adult until I choose to click on view. And that's deliberate because there's so much violence. You don't want to wake up in the morning and the first picture you're going to see is of someone who has their head has been cut off or something like that. I don't want to see that, right? So I shared a screenshot of the there's a placeholder there with Twitter and said, listen, I can't view this for obvious reasons, national laws and also personal. I don't want to start on, you can't unsee, right? And I flagged that because I know that no matter how much you report, you're reporting on one account. This is not a one account problem. There were people who were boasting about seeing it and willing to share it. Even when they were told that this is illegal according to Nigerian laws, many of them, and don't forget, this is also social boasting, FOMO, fear of missing out. I've also seen it, regardless of thinking through it. So this is a challenge with the platforms. But having said that, two things. Number one, we must continue to push governments to protect citizens. What you do with the vulnerable in society is a clear reflection of the kind of community that you are. We know, to be honest, that Nigeria does not protect it. But we must continue to push to make sure that happens. All of the states that are providing good practices, Ekiti State. I'm sure you've seen some of the information coming from Ekiti State, not because my friend is there, but because Lagos also. You see that there are people who have been punished, who have been put on sex offenders registers, and whose pictures have been put up, and who obviously cannot get jobs in decent companies because of that crime they've committed. When we see those good practices, let's promote those good practices. And I think it's important to do that because no matter how much you condemn the states that haven't done it, if you don't show them how to do it, it's not going to happen. The second thing is that for the platforms, yes, the platforms need to do better, but it has to come from us. When, for example, a platform says we can't tell you who the trusted partners are, we have to push back. We're a trusted partner, and I don't believe that it should be secret. If we're trusted as Paradigm Initiative with being able to report content on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever platform, then we should know that that comes with a responsibility. If somebody who has been affected is suffering from that, then if I want to elevate myself to be called a trusted partner, I should know there are consequences for that. So I vehemently oppose that idea of keeping this secret, and they know that. And I think that we need to push back more and demand better of platforms. 4.3 billion people, 4.3 billion people are active across the Facebook universe. That's more than half the number of people in the world. And that means that certain responsibilities come with that. Of course, I trust that we've got representatives of those social media platforms who will say a bit about what they need to do. But the reality is that at the three levels, Nana broke it down. There's the platform, there's the country, and then there are certain standards within the community that apply within the platform. But a very good example that we also have is the conversation around the DSA, the Digital Services Act, that I'm sure many of us have been following with Europe, which is focused on protecting citizens and respecting their rights. We need to have these same conversations here. Unfortunately, the way the conversation is going is the wrong direction. Yesterday, I had a chance of speaking about how Nigeria handles these issues. Nigeria says, like Mohammed, to be specific, says, yeah, I'm mentioning names, and I know people will get offended, and that's fine. This is why I speak the way I speak, so you can understand the issues, and we can stop hiding under umbrellas that are transparent. Like Mohammed says, oh, Twitter, they are using it for IPOP. Let's shut it down, right? Now, that is our approach to issues, and it doesn't work. Because what you do with that is people then go on the ground, if indeed they were using the platform, but go the other way of going through the thorough process, which is what has been done with the DSA. To go through parliament. When you go through parliament, it makes progress. People are able to make contributions. And guess what? Final thing I would say is need to have this stuff. I know as a community, as Nigeria, when we hear the word sex, the room changes. When we hear certain words, our reaction is, no, don't talk about it. When we hear names mentioned or when we are called out, but if we don't have these conversations, DRIF 2032, we will come back here and Aisha will say the same thing, Nana will say the same thing, and I won't show up.
Wow, that was intense. All right. I would like to ask you, Binga, another question, a follow-up question to that. We know that Paradigm Initiative, spearheaded by you and other stakeholders, you've been pushing for the legislation that we know about, the Digital Rights and Freedoms Bill. So I would like to ask, because you dabbled into policy a bit, you dabbled into the law a bit, and you talked about Lai Mohammed, which is in government. So what is the state of play of that? What is the reaction of the government to that particular policy? Because the closest we've had to anything that's closest with, would I say, people-centric bill that actually focuses on digital rights and helps people to actually participate online properly and protect citizens is that particular bill that we're trying to pass. So what is the state of play and the reaction of government towards that particular bill, and has that been?
Okay, so in 2019, Mr. Muhammadu Buhari's reaction was not to sign the bill, but that was also very helpful because and the good thing is that the president, when he decides to put assent, usually, which is great, he doesn't have to, sends a letter back to the National Assembly and says, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reasons why I didn't sign the bill. We should be grateful when that is done, because to be honest, it doesn't have to be done. The legal thing is without assent, you don't have to explain. So we're glad, when people fix roads, even though it's their job, they put a billboard with their face and you say, Mr. Governor, thank you. Unfortunately, that's the price of being Nigerian. So the president didn't sign the bill, but he stated the reasons. One of the reasons was because the bill was considered too technical. It's a funny reason, but sorry. Another reason is because the bill mixed two issues in one: digital rights and data protection. And the president's people felt it should be separated, primarily also because Nigeria, as you know, is involved in very, another topic entirely, conversation on data protection. So there's a new legislation around that. Because usually you can't withhold assent from signing a bill because another bill has been discussed. You withhold assent if there's a law, a bill that has been passed. But that's okay. So what that made us do was to go back to the drawing board. The first thing we did was to call into the same room all of the people who said Mr. President should not sign the bill. Of course, we knew who they were, and said, okay, why wasn't this signed? And they explained based on what the president said. Between then and now, three key things have happened. Number one is that the bill has been updated. Now that there's a data protection bill, data protection component has been removed from the bill, which is fine. So there are two things being done, separately, which is great. But what we've ensured in updating the bill is that the essence of rights represented by the bill is not removed. That's one thing that has happened. Second thing that has happened, which happened in the last 2 weeks, that all stakeholders, including government, because your question was, what's the reaction of government to this? Including government institutions have now come back able to say, well, this is now the new draft. What do you think? And the great news is that people who were originally opposed to issues have now understood digital a bit more, thanks to COVID. COVID is a bad thing, but it helped many of us understand digital more. Schooling had to happen online, education online, talking to your parents online, talking to your partners. For those who were in different locations when the lockdown happened, some of us were in Accra just before the announcement, thankfully made it home in time, but you had to go online. Some of us did not do a lot of Zoom before. I saw a graduation picture just yesterday. Somebody was in a pair of slippers and bathroom and pajama trousers. I don't know if anybody has seen it. People are so used to Zoom calls where you wear nothing sensible, below your waist, that this guy came for his graduation with pajamas, trousers, and slippers, and then put on the graduation gown. I'm sure somebody in this room has seen that picture. Who has seen that picture? Yes, that is what Zoom does to you. Because in Zoom, I just finished one Zoom call before this. What is your bust up that everyone sees, so you don't care about what's down? And those are the new realities for us. So we're glad that people have learned lessons from digital. But I think the thought, and this is very instructive, thing that has happened is the bill had to go back to Parliament. And in shopping for someone to sponsor it again, we realized that the bill gone through first reading. Guess what? The chief whip, which is great, senior officer, saw the bill that was almost passed, saw that it was on digital, and had an interesting conversation with his own family. And this is really why it's important for us to continue to advocate, because you don't know what conversations parliamentarians, judges, and executive members are having in their homes or with their friends. And you don't know when what you say about acting on gender-based violence is going to coincide with the conversation they just had with their aunt or their uncle. Because this gentleman had just started this conversation with his kids who were studying computer science, and then realized, oh, this is very close to what my kids are studying. This is a good bill for Nigeria. And then he took the bill, and then we went to see him, and guess what? Our agitation, our questions, who will sponsor the bill, was met with a senior official in Parliament finding a bill that spoke to what he thought represented his intent for Nigeria at the time. This is why we must continue, because those two circles would coincide at any time. Your agitation and, who knows, enlightened self-interest of the people who are in.
For personal interest. Maybe, yes. So thank you very much for that. Aisha, what will accountability and justice look like for victims of technology facilitated gender-based violence? Nana, you'll also be answering this question, but I would like to hear from Aisha first. So what would that look like? What should that be in your opinion, obviously?
So accountability for people that have experienced violence on digital platforms, right? I think
justice.
Justice. So I don't want to repeat what Nana and Binga, right, have said. So I'm just going to come at it from the angle of the law taking course. Like, I know that we don't have a lot of laws specific to women who have experienced gender-based violence digitally, but there's some current laws that can be put in place. Like, for example, I know there are laws against child pornography in the country. There are laws for when there are laws for statutory rape. Like, I feel like there's intersections for some current laws that we have, even if they're not specific to digital rights and women, that can be invoked for situations that we've seen online, for bullying, for the Chrisland case, for example, people that were sharing it. I suspect, I'm not a lawyer, I suspect that's child pornography, right? So things like that. So what justice would look like is people facing the law for those offenses so that it serves as a deterrent to others. I know that many people feel like I'm a strong believer of let this person pay for his crimes so that you who is thinking about it will think twice when you want to do it. It's like, oh, somebody went to jail. Oh, somebody's on the sex offenders register. Somebody can't get a job. I will chill. So personally, and this might be controversial, I don't feel that you have to be convinced about why you're not doing it. So for example, there's some people that are not committing crimes, not because they want, what's the English? English is evading me, but essentially people are running away from certain crimes, not because they feel like they shouldn't be doing it, but because they know that the law will come for them. And personally, I don't care. If you like, believe it. If you like, don't believe it. As long as you are not harming women and you're not being violent, that is your personal problem. So I believe that what justice will look like is the law taking its course, serving as a deterrent to people who have ideas, who want to share. Next time you want to share that video of 10-year-old kids, in that compromising position, compromising is the wrong word, but in that position, you think twice that this is a crime. I can't go to jail. Let me respect myself. So that's something that I believe. I think that's one way, just so I don't repeat what everybody else said.
All right, Aisha, thank you. Nana?
Okay, so just at the intersection of what Benga and Aisha have said is private sector. The private sector employs more people than government, right? Currently. What I would say is company policies. What are your gender policies internally? Because if I hire you and I find you committing any of those type of crimes, if I see you share that picture, I'm going to sack you and I'm going to paste why I sacked you. You understand? So it's about what your company internal policies are. I think companies should stand up, to the task. They need to start living up to the task of defining their values. What are the company values? Are you an employer of labor whose employee is the type of person who delights in pedophilia? It's important to define those things. Are you an employer of labor whose employee delights in sending email to women, pressing them out, harassing them, or sexually, defiling them in some way, right? Or are you a company that has values? So what I said at the intersection of what Benga and Aisha said is, I like the part about this is what the law says, right? But we all know that justice is slow, even if it's short, right? It is slow. But without the collaboration of private sector, without the collaboration of employers of labor, even justice will grind to a halt. Do you understand? Because still using Chrisland as an issue, I'm in Lagos and I'll use everything in my heart to call them out. Chrisland provided legal representation for someone who raped a 2-year-old. I don't know if you understand. And it's important for society on its own. I come from a culture where we name and shame people. I come from a culture where even though, I abhor some of the parts of it that are bad, you will be paraded in the marketplace, right, for being a thief, for being, a rapist, for being someone who has abused women, right? For being someone who has killed his brother even before you're handed over to the police. So I believe that companies, private sector is a community on its own. If somebody wants to be employed, right? If somebody wants to be employed, the references are for a purpose. Don't just ask about their work habits. What are their habits outside? Do you understand? How did they treat the other team members in the company? It's important to know. Look at their social media history. See, before, I will tell you it's private, but one thing that's constant is change. I've changed my mind. I will look at your social media history. Why? The government looks at your social media history. If there's something they need to know, why shouldn't I know? I am against discriminating against people because of beliefs they hold dear. But if your beliefs are repugnant to natural justice, do you understand? I am against that belief. If your belief is, oh, I'm going to discriminate against this set of protected people. I'm going to do this. I'm going to abuse this person. I'm going to post revenge porn against this person. I'm going to do this. You know, that's not someone I want working for me. That's not someone I want on my team. That's not someone I want hanging around me. If your belief is dressing up nicely, you know, putting up your nice pictures, you can't even be nude in your pictures, but you posted them yourselves. I like you. It's okay. Come and work for me. Do you understand? But if it's about doing things that will be harmful to another person, consciously doing it, either because you're angry, either because you want to get back at them, either because you feel you're bigger, or you want to, you know, you want them to be little. You understand? Then I don't want you around me, and I'll make sure you're a pariah. So it's important that we also, that's what justice is like to me. Making people who find it easy to be abhorrent to women a pariah to society. Making people who find it easy to be abhorrent to minority people, you know, making them a pariah is one big part of justice to me. Another part of justice to me is this. It's important for our police to work. It's important for our police to work. Why I say it's important for our police to work is this. If the police has a unified data system, this form of justice becomes easier. If you want to travel out of the country for anything, work, whatever, they want a police report. They want to see if you've been arrested for things like this. If you're filling out your US forms, they ask you, have you trafficked a person before? Everybody will say no. But it is important that eventually, if there's a database that they can run these things through to see this person was once arrested for beating a woman or for threatening to rape a woman online, then they can ask you, bring where the court absolved you of this matter. So that when you find out that if you've been charged for a thing, even if the matter was not concluded to a logical end, you will be the one agitating that the police goes through the legal court process, because you need that absolving document to say, I did not commit this crime eventually. But if we live like this, there's no effective policing, there is no, there's no working legal system, then this doesn't feel like justice. That is why I will refer to my initial point of making people who are abhorrent human beings barriers to society.
Thank you, Nana. Gringa, please, let me hear from you.
So I'll say something that I've been thinking a lot about the last days. Just happens to coincide with Elon Musk's and the likely impact of that on social media. Social media is a great thing. I'm active in social media. I defended social media as the online and last standing civic space. But when you bring two things, and I'm speaking to the Nigerian context now, even though it applies beyond Nigeria. Two things. When you bring the power of social media to allow people speak their minds. Now, don't forget, we always wanted that superpower. Remember, when you were much younger, you wanted to read people's minds and know what they were thinking. You've got it now. It's Facebook. What's on your mind? And people write stories. Basket Mouth made a joke of it many years ago when he woke up in the morning and said, I'm awake now, I'm brushing my teeth. A few minutes later, I'm on the toilet seat. And people didn't get what he was saying, but he was trying to explain what social media is now. And you can have all the conversation around it. But don't forget, that tool is powerful. People use it. But when it goes into the hands of a community where people suspend reason, which by the way is the reason why when people say, will Donald Trump come back to Twitter? I say, I don't know, but that Trump suspension represents something. And what it represents is this. Now, look at the context of education in Nigeria, and this applies across many African countries. The development stage for every child is best between 0 and 5. Forgive me, I'm a father of a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, so these things are like very active in my mind. Now, that's the age where when the sense of right or wrong, the sense of consciousness is not formed, anything after that, you take what you get. Now, what do we do with 0 to 5-year-olds? 0 to 5-year-olds in Nigeria, in communities where people can afford it, are handed over to nannies. For those who send them to schools, they send them to schools, many schools, including those who don't understand the principle of duty of care. In fact, when you look at the UNICEF data, the recent UNICEF data, forget that 13 million children out of school. Look at what is happening to 5-year-olds and below, malnourishment, and all of these things. And what that means is that many of the people on social media are people who cannot determine what is right or wrong. They can't tell that saying to a woman that I will book a hotel room and I will rape you is a threat to rape. It is not a joke. It is not something you can explain away. It means that we have those two things coming together, and it's a major, major challenge. Now, what do we then do? What we must do is, and I think this is really important, and I'm speaking particularly to the gentlemen in the room, and this is deliberate. I'm glad that you haven't thrown tough questions at me as the only man on this panel. But when a woman is being attacked, usually what I see is that some of us excuse that and defend the person. And the problem with that is the day it happens to you or to someone you know, then what that person will experience is based on the fact that you did not assert what should be acceptable community standards. And when I say acceptable community standard, I'm not speaking of national standards. I'm not speaking of platform standards. I'm speaking of what you want to experience as a community. Now, what hurts me the most is that, I studied engineering, and this was not our idea of the internet. So I got into school in the year that the internet was really taking shape. I've aged myself, I know, around 1995, right? And the original design was for protocols, not for platforms the way we have it now, where there's a walled garden. Facebook has its own universe. Twitter has its own universe. That was not the plan. The plan was an open platform where people can communicate across and where communities can exclude people who are not, like you said, who are not fit for that society, either because they miss the 0 to 5 stage or because they just want to be stupid. Because there are people who just want to get followers and do stupid things to get followers. So it means that we must be able, while the work is going on, I don't know if there's going to be a setback to Twitter now. Twitter was already doing Project Blue in terms of becoming more open and things like that. While that conversation is ongoing, we need to realize that we're the custodians of the kind of experience we want to get online. Otherwise, this platform, not just online, all digital platforms will then become an excuse. The actions there will then become an excuse for governments who already have an agenda to shut down the entire civic space. Look at what happened in Uganda. Why was the internet shut down during elections? Because M7 is that I want another rap. Museveni said, these children use it to gist and just say things that will waste their time. That responsibility is on us as users. And I think that it is not just because we want to use this platform, but because whatever experience we allow to persist. And that's when conversations like, say, Chrislands, for example, happen. And this is why I say we need to have these difficult conversations. Please, if you have a chance to contribute to the conversation, do not stay away because you say that, this is a taboo topic. But we need to seek to understand, why is it okay for certain things to happen and impunity is the order of the day? And it's not just on the topic we're discussing today, on data abuse. And I'm sure everyone in this room is aware of this. You've got BVN, you've got NIN, got all of this data. And some of this data have been lost. Some of them have been sold on the black market. I was just demonstrating to a meeting that we had, I think, 2 weeks ago on Gigi.ng. And this is not on Gigi. Maybe it's on Gigi, but it's not, I don't think it's on Gigi. On Gigi.ng, I found information. This is not the dark web, right? The dark web is even very different. This one is open web, where people were selling data. You're in Lagos now. Before you leave, for those who don't live in Lagos, okay, no, don't go to Otigba, but there used to be a time when you could buy a CD of 5 million prominent Nigerians, phone numbers, names, and other details. And we thought it was a lie, bought a copy then, we tested some of the numbers, and when we heard the voices, we reported till tomorrow. Tomorrow, nothing has been done in terms of that data abuse. So impunity is a challenge that we have. As long as there is no, and I like the way Aisha put it, people queue in many places, not because they want to queue. People respect traffic light. I can never forget, first time in my life as a 24-year-old, 24, 25, in Geneva, 3 a.m. Was it 2 or 3 a.m.? The car we were in, coming, we're praying for the next day when we had the youth caucus of the VSIS and things like that. The car stopped at a traffic light. Let's even say 2 a.m. Nobody, road straight, free, left, free. You dey craze? That was my reaction until I realized that, and I asked, Teacher Akinson and others were there. I said, okay, so why? And they explained to us that if the guy goes, you see that thing at the top? That's a camera. He will meet his ticket in his house. So it is not because the guy wants to obey, but he knows there are consequences. What we don't have in Nigeria is consequences. People who have done the worst of things are contesting for office in 2023. Some of them will win, and some of them will be the ones to decide whether the laws that we require should pass. And I'm not speaking about this to say it's only politicians that are these people. Our community produces all of these people, but guess what? As long as there are no consequences, we will keep having this.
Thank you very much. I'm actually very excited that I put together this set of people to talk about this because it has been enlightening and it has been amazing for me. And just so we quickly round up this session, are there any last words? What is one thing you want us to take away from yesterday? If we have not listened to everything you have been saying, what is that thing that we must go away with? Aisha, let's start with you.
I think we can make all the laws in the world, come here to talk about why it's important to for platforms to pay attention to violence against women. But I think what I want people to think about as they go on in their daily lives is I want them to normalize having difficult conversations that revolve around violence against women, not because it's exciting to talk about things like that, but because you find out that the more you talk about it, the more you pick up wrong or right. Some people, like Benga said, genuinely don't know or have been conditioned to believe that their thought process on women is the right thing to do. I've been working with women my entire life, and you meet even women who are like, but this is normal now, this is right. And the reason why those thought processes still exist is because we are not talking about it. It's like what he said, that when people hear sex or rape, they're like, no, I don't want to talk about it, but you have to. If you don't talk about it, how will you be able to talk to that 0 to 5-year-old about, okay, so nobody's supposed to touch you this way, or you're not supposed to talk to strange men, or things like that. So because we've been silenced, like there's some conversations, even now, as old as I am, that I try to have with my mom, and she's like, no, please, I don't want to talk about it. No, if you miss it, leave me. So if we have a generation that continues to uphold these things, we're never going to understand why violence against women is wrong. We're never going to understand why child pornography is a problem. We're never going to get it. I'm not trying to say that there are people, obviously there are people that get it, but just perhaps don't care. Maybe there are no consequences or whatever, but there are genuinely people that have been conditioned to believe that women shouldn't have rights, that it's okay for me to share a video of 10-year-olds engaging in sexual activity, that it's okay for me to hit a woman. There's so many surveys, so many conversations that you ask people and they're like, oh, I thought it was normal now. People do it all the time. So more conversations about this, more conversations, normalizing women's rights, normalizing sex. I think that's why I want everyone to live it. Please don't be ashamed when you hear someone talking about sex or women's rights. Talk about it, open up. I think that's it for me.
Yeah, Aisha.
Thank you very much. I'm going to echo what Wenga said. One of the things me and my daughter always do is every time I say actions have what, she say consequences. I'm like, good. it's important. On Twitter, a couple of years ago, a governor's son threatened to rape somebody's mother. Today, that governor's son wants to run for House of Assembly or National Assembly, right? And yet people are rationalizing his capacities, his excellence in studies. One of the things I know is that human beings are a totality of themselves. One flaw in character remains what it is, a flaw, right? It's important that we start knowing as a community, as a people, that actions have consequences. When you threaten, oh, I will rape your mother, that's not you being angry, right? That's not you expressing yourself. That's not you being open. That's not you being worthy. It is what it is, a sexual offense. What I want is that I want the law, I want companies, I want organizations to normalize putting online sexual violence as a sexual offense. It should go into the sexual offenders register. It shouldn't go into he was badly behaved, she was badly behaved. That's not it. I want to make sure that we call things by the rightful name. A threat to rape is a sexual offense. I want us to normalize calling things by their rightful names, calling crimes by what they are, and not trying to make it appear lighter than it is. I want us to understand clearly, like Benga said, that actions do have consequences. And more often than not, it is left for the society to implement what those consequences are. Thank you.
Thank you, Nana.
Support organizations doing the difficult work. I'm glad that Tech has put this together, so gender-based violence and how it applies online. There are many organizations across Nigeria that are doing the difficult work. And at times, because we don't understand the work that they do, and I know how it feels like for people not to understand what you do. I was saying to someone, I'm still trying to explain to my mother and my son what I do exactly. I took my son to my office and he said, but I thought you were an engineer, because all of the conversations you've been having have been about this person, that person, and at some point he read a book about Mandela and thought I was human rights and all that. We may not understand what they're doing, but I know that the work we do at Paradigm Initiative has benefited largely and a lot from people who, even when they don't understand in full, they know that when it comes to digital rights and digital inclusion, this is what you guys do. So when there are cases or when there are opportunities, they say, oh, talk to PIN. Please support institutions that are doing the hard work. When people are tweeting and I say this happened, that happened, please share with those organizations. They understand the context, they know what what to do, and they will make sure that when next someone needs help, they're able to reach. So please, my final word, find those organizations. Some of them you don't have to find them, you know them already. Support the work they do in any way you can. When they invite you to come and speak on a panel, say yes. Or when they need you to please help share some information in terms of what needs to be done, please share the information. And because the truth is, while we're still hoping that justice will be done, the other side of it is we need to make sure that the good and the best practices become more popular. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to add my beats to this. At TECA, we have what we call the Coffee Answer Convention. And then our last episode of that event, it was also on technology facilitated gender-based violence. And we had this person that was very much opposed to everything we were saying because he has been socialized that way. It was a full-blown argument. And at the end of the day, I was glad because he said something. He said, it's because we have spaces like this, that's why we can educate ourselves on things like this. So it was glad that he came because his orientation started changing from the conversation, from that gathering, from we knocking down every single thing he was saying about technology facilitated gender-based violence. Again, that goes to say that conversations like this are so important. Reiterating what Aisha said, we need to have the difficult conversations. We need to be able to, put these thoughts out there and, okay, what is the problem? How is the way forward? There's something Chioma Maidi says a lot. She says personal responsibility. in everything that we do, we need to be responsible for the kind of life that we live, both online and offline. And that goes to speak to the content we post, our reactions to people, and what we do. We need to take responsibility for our actions because they have consequences. And our laws should also reflect that. So thank you very much for this session. My name is Amina Salaudin, Project Officer at TECA. And thank you so much, Nana Gwenga and Aisha, for joining us today. So that will be the end of my session. Thank you, everyone. Okay, please, a group photograph. Yeah.
Okay, please, can we put our hands together again for the wonderful session? And I know we've all been following the agenda, so we are actually very, very excited knowing that the next item is tea break. So we can go outside and have a tea break right now. Stretch your legs, network, ask questions, and we'll be back at 12:30 for the next session. Thank you.
She can end the stream. It doesn't really display. And they should give me something I can display, or they should give me video. They should give me video. They should give me music. It's inside the email I said. Check the email. But that email, I need access to that file. Ask that.